Saint Helena rises from the South Atlantic as a solitary mass of volcanic rock. It lies more than 1,000 miles from the nearest continental shore, positioned along old maritime routes between Europe, Africa, and the Indian Ocean. In the early 16th century, it was uninhabited. No permanent settlements existed. No harbors had been shaped to receive ships. The island functioned only as geography. Steep cliffs ring much of the coastline. Inland, narrow valleys cut through hardened lava flows. Fresh water appears in small streams fed by cloud cover that gathers around the higher elevations. Vegetation is uneven. Some slopes remain bare and exposed to wind. Others support grasses, shrubs, and scattered trees carried there by birds or ocean currents over centuries. The climate is stable but not gentle. Winds shift without warning. Rain comes in irregular intervals. The sea surrounding the island is deep and often restless, making approach difficult for vessels without local knowledge. For sailors, Saint Helena offered rest, water, and limited provisions. For anyone left behind, it offered separation. Before human habitation, the island had no memory. No paths had been worn into its surface. No shelters had been built. Its valleys and ridges existed without names. It was a place that did not expect to be occupied, and it did not accommodate permanence. In this setting, isolation was not imposed by walls or distance alone. It was enforced by water, weather, and time. Fernão Lopes was born in Portugal in the late 15th century, during a period of rapid expansion by the Portuguese crown. Exact details of his early life are not preserved in historical records. His name appears only later, attached to punishment and exile rather than origin or family. What is known is that he entered military service and was sent overseas as part of Portugal's campaigns in the Indian Ocean. At the beginning of the 16th century, Portugal was consolidating its presence along key trade routes. Fortified ports were established in East Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. Soldiers like Lopes were deployed far from home, often for years at a time. Service was harsh. Discipline was strict. Loyalty to the crown and to commanding officers was enforced through severe penalties. Lopes served in the Portuguese garrison at Goa, one of the most important colonial centers in the empire. Goa functioned as a military base, an administrative hub, and a center for trade. Life there was structured by rank and order. Soldiers lived under constant oversight. Infractions were punished publicly to maintain authority. At some point during his service, Lopes was accused of desertion. Contemporary accounts state that he defected to forces aligned with the Ottoman Empire or local Muslim rulers hostile to Portuguese control. The precise circumstances remain unclear. Records do not indicate whether the desertion was planned, coerced, or driven by survival. What is documented is that Lopes was later captured when Portuguese forces regained control of the area. Desertion was considered one of the most serious offenses in the military code of the time. It represented not only disobedience but betrayal. The punishment imposed on Lopes reflected this view. He was sentenced to mutilation. His right arm and left leg were cut off. His nose and ears were removed. The penalty was intended to be permanent and visible. Despite the severity of the sentence, Lopes was not executed. After his punishment, he was transported back toward Portugal by ship. During this journey, the world he had known, military service, movement between ports, and connection to other people, was reduced to confinement aboard a vessel moving across open ocean. It was during this return voyage that Lopes made a request that altered the remainder of his life. The physical punishment imposed on Fernão Lopes did not end his usefulness to the crown. After his mutilation, he remained alive, capable of speech, and conscious of his actions. His injuries marked him permanently, but they did not erase his identity as a soldier who had broken military law. As the ship carrying him sailed westward from the Indian Ocean, it followed established Portuguese routes. These voyages were long and routine, stopping at known anchor points for water and rest. One of these was Saint Helena, an island already recognized as a strategic resupply location but not yet settled. During the voyage, Lopes asked to be left on the island. The request is recorded by contemporary chroniclers, including João de Barros. No detailed explanation for his decision survives. It is not known whether his request was driven by shame, fear of returning to Portugal, or a desire for isolation. What is known is that the request was granted. Leaving a mutilated man on an uninhabited island was not considered an act of mercy or cruelty. It was an administrative decision. Saint Helena was under Portuguese control. Ships passed it regularly. If Lopes survived, he would remain within the reach of the empire. If he did not, no further action would be required. He was put ashore with limited provisions. The records do not specify exact supplies, but standard practice suggests basic food, possibly seeds, and simple tools. No shelter awaited him. No structures had been built. Once the ship departed, contact ceased. This moment marked the point of no return. Lopes was no longer a soldier under command, nor a prisoner under guard. He was alone on an island that had never supported permanent human life. His survival would depend on adaptation rather than obedience. From this point forward, time would be measured not by orders or campaigns, but by seasons, weather, and physical endurance. For now Lopes began his life on Saint Helena without a plan recorded in any document. What survives are later descriptions of how he lived, observed by sailors who stopped at the island in the years that followed. These accounts are fragmented, but together they describe a pattern of systematic survival rather than improvisation. The island offered no ready shelter. Lopes would have had to locate a place inland, away from the strongest coastal winds. Valleys provided partial protection and access to fresh water. Streams flowed intermittently, fed by rainfall and cloud cover. Early Portuguese visitors later noted cultivated areas, suggesting that Lopes identified arable ground and remained near it. Despite his injuries, he was capable of movement. Contemporary sources confirm that he adapted physically to his missing limbs. Mobility was slow and limited, but not absent. Over time, repetition replaced strength. Tasks were reduced to what could be done consistently rather than efficiently. Food came from multiple sources. Saint Helena supported wild goats left by earlier sailors as a future food supply. These animals multiplied rapidly. Lopes hunted them using methods not described in detail. He also cultivated vegetables. Chroniclers mention gardens, which implies the planting and maintenance of crops over many seasons. Seeds may have been provided when he was left on the island, or obtained later from passing ships. Shelter was basic. There is no evidence of permanent construction. Lopes likely used natural formations, reinforced with available materials. His needs were minimal. Protection from rain and wind was sufficient. Comfort was not a priority and may not have been achievable. Isolation shaped his daily routine. There was no audience for labor and no external schedule. Days were organized around survival tasks, gathering food, tending plants, securing water, and maintaining shelter. Injury imposed limits, but it also enforced discipline. Movements were deliberate. Waste was costly. Mental endurance was as necessary as physical adaptation. Lopes lived without conversation for extended periods. Passing ships did not always land. Years could pass between encounters. When contact did occur, Lopes did not attempt reintegration. He remained on the island by choice, refusing offers to leave. Portuguese sailors began to expect him there. His presence became part of the island's known geography. Visitors described him as withdrawn and cautious. He avoided prolonged contact and retreated inland after brief exchanges. The island was no longer empty, but it was still silent. Time accumulated without markers. Lopes aged without record. Seasons repeated. His existence narrowed to the maintenance of a small, functional space within a larger, indifferent landscape. Saint Helena did not change to accommodate him. He changed to remain within it. As the years passed, the effects of isolation became more pronounced. For now Lopes aged without medical care and without relief from the injuries imposed on him decades earlier. His mutilations never healed in any restorative sense. They remained sources of pain, limitation, and infection risk. Survival required constant accommodation to a body that could not recover. Accounts from sailors who encountered him later in life describe a man who had grown physically diminished. Movement was slower. Tasks that once could be managed daily required more time or were abandoned altogether. Hunting became less frequent. Cultivation narrowed to small plots that could be maintained without extended labor. The scale of his survival contracted. Isolation also altered his relationship with other people. When ships anchored at Saint Helena, Lopes sometimes approached but did not remain. Chroniclers noted that he avoided prolonged interaction. He accepted food or supplies but declined company. He did not seek passage away from the island, even when it was offered. His refusal was consistent. The reasons for this choice were not recorded by Lopes himself. Later writers speculated, but speculation cannot be confirmed. What is clear is that his identity had separated from the world beyond the island. Portugal, the military, and even punishment had become distant abstractions. The island was no longer exile in the sense of temporary removal. It had become permanence. Psychological strain did not express itself through visible breakdown. There are no reports of erratic behavior or violence. Instead, sailors described restraint. Lopes maintained distance. He did not attach himself to crews or request ongoing support. His isolation was deliberate and sustained. Time blurred without structure. Years were marked only by physical decline and by changes in the land he used. Paths worn by repeated movement became visible to later visitors. Gardens appeared and disappeared as his capacity fluctuated. His presence altered small sections of the island, but only temporarily. Eventually, his health worsened beyond recovery. Age compounded injury. The environment that had sustained him for decades no longer compensated for loss of strength. Survival shifted from active maintenance to endurance. By the time records mention him less frequently, Lopes was no longer a figure of curiosity. He was an expected but fading presence. The island remained. His ability to persist within it narrowed toward an end that was neither sudden nor dramatic. In the later years of Fernão Lopes' life, contact with the outside world continued at a reduced pace. Portuguese ships still used Saint Helena as a resupply point, but visits were irregular. Crews changed. Knowledge of Lopes was passed on as part of maritime routine rather than official record. He was no longer an anomaly. He was part of the island. Some visitors attempted to persuade him to leave. By this point, the Portuguese crown had issued a pardon for his desertion. The punishment imposed decades earlier had already exceeded any practical need for justice or deterrence. Lopes was legally free to return. He refused. Contemporary sources agree on this point. Despite opportunities for departure, he chose to remain. No explanation was preserved in his own words. Chroniclers framed the decision as penitence or preference for solitude, but these interpretations reflect the values of the writers rather than confirmed intent. Eventually, Lopes did leave the island once. Records indicate that he was transported to Portugal after his pardon, likely at the urging of authorities rather than his own request. His time there was brief. The environment of the court and the presence of other people did not reverse decades of separation. He did not reintegrate. After a short period, he requested to return to Saint Helena. The request was granted. He was put ashore again, this time not as a condemned man but as someone choosing removal from society. He lived there until his death. The exact date is uncertain, but it occurred sometime after 1545. There was no ceremony. No official report marked the event. His body remained on the island he had occupied for most of his adult life. Saint Helena would later become permanently settled. Fortifications would be built. Paths would be named. The island would enter global history for reasons unrelated to Fernão Lopes. By then, his presence had already receded into record. Fernão Lopes did not leave behind letters, testimony, or explanation. What remains of his life exists only through external observation. He appears in records as a consequence of punishment, as a figure encountered by passing ships, and finally as a name associated with a place. His survival was not exceptional because of innovation or conquest of the environment. It was defined by reduction. Over time, his world narrowed to a valley, a water source, a cultivated patch of ground. Movement was limited. Contact was brief. Choice existed, but it was exercised quietly and without justification. Saint Helena did not become meaningful because of him, but his life became inseparable from it. He did not transform the island, and the island did not redeem him. Their relationship was functional and prolonged, nothing more. Geography provided what was necessary. He accepted what was available. In historical terms, Lopes represents an early and unusual form of exile. Not banishment enforced by distance alone, but withdrawal sustained over decades. His case was documented not because it was exemplary, but because it was persistent. When later generations encountered Saint Helena as a strategic outpost or a place of imprisonment, Lopes' story remained in the background. It offered no lesson. It provided no resolution. It ended as it was lived, without witnesses, without statement, and without return.